Ironically, it's a more surprisingly traditional journey than I ever thought that I would make, coming from I came from a divorced family, my grandparents were divorced. I didn't necessarily think that I would have children till later in life. I didn't think I'd get married. Suddenly I find myself meeting this person, the love of my life, getting a ring on my finger, wearing a white dress, having all my friends celebrating our marriage, and having a house and 2 dogs and a cat and a school at the end of the road, and this, you know, quite a very almost traditional lifestyle. And the next step was inevitably to think about children. And so about a year and a half ago, we looked into it and realised it's not so simple as it is for other couples, obviously other opposite sex couples, and and we started embarking down the route of exploring how to do it.
Was that quite a complicated route?
The first question was whether to use a known donor or to buy sperm on the internet, and the known donor, it ended up being a very complicated option, a bit too complicated. I mean, legally, the implications, you're never going to be protected against anything happening in the future. And we wanted to have a family unit that was going to be, we didn't want to have any kind of fragility and potential for any disruption. You know, as I said, I came from a broken home and I wanted to create something very, very safe. I wanted to make a nest, and so we bought the sperm. We bought enough for our siblings in the future. And we went to the clinic and found out about the 2 options, one of which is to egg share, and the other one is IUI, which is the simpler option.
And the smile on your face is that, oh, now you have a healthy baby boy.
Yeah.
Jodie, I know you wanted children and it hasn't happened.
Yes.
You've accepted that it's not going to happen.
Yes.
Has that been a very difficult process for you? Has it been a kind of grief?
It was a phenomenally difficult process, and I think also because it was a long while before I realised that what I was going through was grief. And actually, when I realised it was grief, that was really actually the beginning of starting to get through it. And as I started to write about it being grief, women from all over the world were like, finally, we understand what we're going through.
Because more and more women than at any time in our history who are sort of in their late 30s, early 40s are now not having children. Do you feel that in our society they have a voice?
No, sometimes I feel like it's just me. There's also because it's quite difficult to have a voice, because when we try to talk about it, the conversation gets closed down by what either I would call a miracle baby story. Oh, don't worry, you look really young. I know this woman who, I read about this on the internet, whatever it might be. Or why don't you adopt? So it's actually very difficult to have the conversation. It's quite a taboo conversation. People find childlessness very confronting and unnerving.
There's a difference too, isn't there, between being childless and child-free, actually choosing not to have a baby, and more women are actually making that decision as well.
It's a really important distinction. I mean, child-free is, many child-free women and men have known since they were very young they didn't want to be parents, although they're often not believed. People go, oh, you'll change your mind. And for them, it can be quite difficult for them to understand why childless people are so gutted, because in a way, they got the life they wanted at a time when it's possible to, you know, have a life and not be a parent. And they see us with ostensibly the same life, you know, feeling, you know, really, really sad.
For many different reasons, both of you are probably judged by some people. Is it something you've been through yet, Rachel? Have you and your partner taken the baby out for a walk and had people look at you and judge you?
I think we've been really fortunate that, I think maybe because we're in London, maybe because we've been lucky, but we've been really embraced. Family and friends have been wondering, this baby is going to be very, very loved. And actually in the area, we did think about possibly, should we move to Brighton, should we move up to Stokey?
That's an area we should tell our international viewers that is very gay friendly.
Yeah, where our situation would be a lot more common. And it is actually a conversation we will have when we think about getting our son into the local primary school, because that will be a discussion later on whether, you know, should he be in a class where there are other same-sex parents, but that's later down the road.
And what do you say to people who, I've heard this before, of course, you know, a child should have a father?
Well, I think that a child should have should have love, and a child should have support, and I think a child should have two parents who are financially able to hopefully put a roof over their head and give them the food they need and support them. So I think that these are the priorities that come top on the list here, and we have a lot of. It is very important to surround that child in a lot of diverse role models. So we've made.
Jodie, how do you put that grief behind you and advise women in your position that there is a rich and fulfilling life still?
I think the thing that I learnt is that grief is a dialogue, not a monologue, and that there's a big difference between grief and grieving. And in many ways, kind of grief is like unrequited grieving. It's almost like unrequited love. You need to actually have that understanding and empathetic other to have a conversation with. Ideally you need to sit or be around or be in communication with, perhaps in my online community, with other women who get what you're going through, because that's how grief is processed. It's processed by talking about your story with people who understand it until you're really bored of talking about your story. That's usually a pretty good sign that you're moving through it. And it's I have many sort of gay women also who are childless in my online community, and that can be difficult too, because a lot of people presume that they've chosen not to have children. So there's so many ways you can sort of do something different to other people's expectations.